for Alabama, everything that we thought we knew about them, at least for me, it's not that it's being questioned, it's that it's a different Alabama program now.
Hello and welcome. It's always college football. Today is October 9th, and we appreciate you coming to us from wherever it is you're coming to us from. Like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. I also want to give a little shout out too. And I have not been paying great attention to this. I kind of go like a couple days at a time and then I'll check it. Y'all have been pouring into the reviews, I might add. Cockiest, Chance Cam, RMGTX, Canes Forever, Gabby U22, all you guys, Adrian Bradley, LBI Jim, like I appreciate so much all of you guys showing support for the show, because we did at one point have a 5-star show here on Apple Podcast and on Spotify. And then teams were left out of the playoffs, and we had a bunch of people infiltrate our ratings and reviews to give it just 1 star. And as a result, our ratings have been sabotaged. So those of you that have been answering back and giving us some love, it means a lot, and we appreciate you. We're here for y'all because we know y'all love college football. We have a great show for you today. We have Matt Barrie that's going to join the show here. ESPN, host of SportsCenter, host of ESPN College Football Final, calls games on Thursday nights. So he is a busy man, but we have a lot of things that we want to talk to him about coming up this week in college football. We always like to have next week's conversations today. So we try to set the table. Hey, if this team wins, if this team loses, what will the reaction be? That's what we try to do here on our Wednesday show. So like I said, like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, all that fun stuff. But let's dive in to our conversation with Matt Barrie. All right, we welcome him in now, host of the Matt Barrie Show on ESPN's YouTube channel. We also see him on SportsCenter regularly. He calls the Thursday night game, and he's in studio all weekend for ESPN games. He's Matt Barrie. Matty, what's going on, my friend?
Man, I love doing this. I love talking with you, kind of a mid-season progress report. We catch up all the time on SportsCenter and then on the radio every once in a while. So it's good to be on your show with you.
No, it's going to be fun. So we'll start Friday night, where you have a very vested interest in your Arizona State Sun Devils, who are undefeated at home this year. They welcome in Utah, who was at one point a couple weeks ago the favorite in the Big 12. Now, the Big 12 feels like every game matters because I don't know which one's actually going to matter. Right. Here's one where we might have some surprise. So if Utah and or Arizona State and or Iowa State or BYU, if one of these teams kind of emerges, do you ever really trust them based on what you've seen so far?
No, it's legitimately every year, every few years, we get one of those leagues, Greg, that's kind of a dog-eat-dog league. Yeah. And you've got a lot of, it's not top heavy, it's not bottom heavy. It's just really, really good football. We actually had that with the Pac-12 a year ago. And ironically enough, these are Pac-12 teams we're talking about, where everybody's in it. And Iowa State and Rocco Becht don't get talked about much, but there they are sitting undefeated. Arizona State, year 2, Kenny Dillingham. They run the ball at a high clip. Sam Levitt has gotten better every week. And then with Utah, does anyone know when Cam Rising is going to play football again? No one knows what's going on with Cam Rising. He's in warmups. He's in his full uniform. They went with Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's brother. And so it's one of those situations where even Texas Tech got a big win over Arizona. Arizona the week before got a big win. It's just, there's so many things that can happen. This league is going to be entertaining for us, and I can't wait to watch it the rest of the season. But it's a one bid league. I mean, they did it. It's just, there's too much parity. Baylor could go get anyone. Colorado's in contention in the Big 12 championship. I mean, anyone on any week can win in this league, and I think that's what's going to be entertaining about it. But I think it's going to get them come playoff time.
Is there anyone that you feel like maybe just slightly a cut above? Is it BYU, who's undefeated at the moment?
Retzlaff's good, but BYU is one of those teams that they're gonna out physical anybody in the league. Between them and Utah, I mean they're gonna beat your ass for a good 4 quarters. There isn't a team that I'd be like, that's it. Like Kansas State. We haven't even sat here and talked about Kansas State.
Yeah.
Good Avery Johnson's really good. But then you wonder what happened when they went into Provo and got beat down. And so if I'm looking top, I'd say BYU because of the start they've had to the season. I'd say Iowa State because they have a great running game and play defense, and Rocco does just enough. I'd probably then go Colorado or Kansas State just because we know what they have at quarterback, and that's going to be big coming down the stretch.
Yeah, moving over to the SEC now. Alabama, fresh off the loss to Vandy last week. Strong reaction, obviously, nationwide about where Bama currently is. They have South Carolina this week, which has proven multiple times that they can play up to the level that they need to play at to knock anybody off. They also have shown last week to be inept offensively. So is this the get-right recipe that Alabama needs to get home against an offense that has some challenges? Or in the event in which this game's closer than the experts think, what do you think the reaction will be?
Yeah, it's funny. And you and I are both big Shane Beamer fans. I worked in Columbia, so I still have connections and friends out there, and it's a great place. But I think the Kentucky game for South Carolina was the anomaly. And I think what we've seen over the past few weeks is the regression to the mean of who they are as a team. And that's unfortunate because there's some talent there. The quarterback situation is interesting with Sellers and Robbie Ashford. And for Alabama, everything that we thought we knew about them, at least for me, it's not that it's being questioned. It's that it's a different Alabama program now. In no world in the history of college football would Nick Saban have allowed Alabama to get the win of the year at home against Georgia and then a week later go to Vanderbilt and lose. That wasn't going to happen. And I'm not blaming Kalen DeBoer. I think it's unfair for everyone to pile on him. It's just a new era. And so that's what we'll have to see with Alabama moving forward. Here's what we know about the Tide. They're wildly talented. The defense leaves a lot to be desired over the last 6 quarters. But we now know how Alabama reacts after a huge win. We're about to find out how they react after a big loss. And I think the South Carolina game is going to be good for them because the Nick Saban holdovers, those players, there's still a lot of pride in that program. It's one of the best in history. We'll see it this week. And I think South Carolina is a good one. And it's funny you bring up South Carolina because I was sitting in studio on Saturday with Mullen and Galloway. And I was like, it'd be one thing if Alabama beat Georgia and then went and lost to South Carolina. You can maybe justify that because of the Kentucky. But now you're not going to be able to justify it at all if it happens. And I don't think that it will.
It's one of those where I look at South Carolina, and while I think the defense is great, you kind of know, all right, hey, you're going to have your team's attention when you play South Carolina, right? You can't just sleepwalk and say, oh, South Carolina's coming to town, being in good shape, no problem. They woke everybody up with their Kentucky performance and how well they played LSU. And while it hasn't been quite the same the last couple of weeks, this team is super dangerous. So I don't think they're a team that you want to mess around with. For Alabama, though, in the event in which they win this game convincingly, let's say they go out and they beat South Carolina, comparable to the way Ole Miss beat them last week.
Yeah.
Will the reaction revert back to, oh, Alabama's the greatest thing since sliced bread? Or are people still going to kind of gravitate towards the low-hanging fruit that was the Vanderbilt performance?
Well, it'll be 2-part. One, it's like, okay, Alabama's stabilized. They're good. But once you see that, you're going to have a hard time trusting them. You're going to have a really hard time trusting Alabama. They're still going to be one of the top 3 to 4 teams in the SEC. But now on any given week, they're capable of being beat. And I don't think we've had that in a while with them. I think at the beginning of last year, especially the USF game in Tampa, when Milroe didn't even play and it was Buckner and Ty Simpson, and they almost got beat. And it's like, oh, what's going on in Tuscaloosa? And then little by little, they started gaining that momentum. But we haven't seen it. We haven't trusted them, right? And so and look, there's so much football left to play. They go to Tennessee. They go to Tennessee in 2 weeks. Now, if they get by South Carolina and what Tennessee just did against Arkansas, which was unbelievable, you're sitting there going, okay, Tennessee was really, really good. The offense was unstoppable and they played defense. Alabama was really good in the first half against Georgia. Now I've got 2 games with 2 teams that lost games they shouldn't have. This will be interesting. And so for the rest of the season, and Greg, I think this is the case with a lot of people, who do you trust? I mean, do you trust Ohio State? I mean, we will learn after this weekend. Do you trust Oregon? I don't know. I mean, so the only thing I trust in college football is Ashton Jeanty's the best player, and that's it. It's the only thing that I trust.
Travis Hunter might have something to say about that, but I respect
Travis
it.
Hunter too, yeah.
I respect it. I like plant the flag on Ashton Jeanty. I'm all good with that. Let's go over to the Red River rivalry. Look, first edition of both these teams being in the SEC. It's one of my favorite games. I grew up with this game.
Yep.
I look at Texas right now, and with the performance to Michigan, maybe we got sold a bit of false goods because I don't think Michigan's very good. They dominated Michigan, but this will be the first team that they've faced this year that has legitimate threats offensively, assuming Oklahoma's a little healthier than they've been the last couple weeks. So if Texas wins convincingly, like Vegas expects them to, does that assert them as the number one team, or are there still question marks for you?
Again, it's a trust thing, and I trust Texas implicitly right now because they got the wins they needed to. They went on the road to Michigan, got the win. And they have the best quarterback situation in the country. That if Quinn Ewers goes down again, Arch Manning, he's growing. He got 2 games of invaluable time starting, including an SEC game. And so you go into this game, and it's my favorite game. I've been to 7 of them because of my time in Oklahoma and then working in Dallas. So I love this game. I love that it's split right down the middle, 50-50 at the Cotton Bowl. I love now that it's in the SEC. The SEC people are like, oh, it's the SEC version. This game's been going on forever. It's an amazing game. This doesn't change anything for Texas and Oklahoma because it's got the SEC logo next to it. But I think Texas really will have something to say about being the best team in the country. Because, I mean, I don't know who number 1 is. I really believe anybody's capable of being beat. But if Texas goes in there, all signs point to Quinn Ewers coming back and starting. They got a week to get healthy. If they go in there and handle Oklahoma and beat them convincingly, then you really do have to start thinking, okay, we're going to see Texas, Georgia, and in 2 weeks. So we'll know more about them then. But at least for 1 week, based on what we just saw in week 6, I would say that Texas probably lays claim to the best team in the country.
Yeah, it's hard to push back on that. Let's say Texas loses.
Yeah.
And now it's 2 years in a row where they lost to an undermanned, outmanned Oklahoma team that seemingly rises to the occasion. Because let's be real, Texas had no business losing to that version of Oklahoma last year.
No.
They had no business at all. They did. And now Jeff Levy's gone and you have a different quarterback and all this other stuff. So if this version gets Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns, is that elevated concern?
No.
Or is it just parity in sport?
No, I said this the other day on the radio. Here's what happened this weekend, and I'm going to parlay it into my answer here. Had this last weekend happened last year, you probably could have checked off 2 of those 4 top 10 teams out of the college football playoff race. Because you can't justify some of these losses in a 4-team playoff. You just can't, right? So now, because we have a 12-team playoff, Alabama's okay, Tennessee's okay, Missouri's okay, Ole Miss from a couple weeks ago is okay, Texas loses to Oklahoma, they're fine because you get Georgia the following week. So all this does for us is it gives us talking points in a vacuum for 1 week, right? It doesn't take away from the regular season because the games are still so good, but it takes away a little bit of the meaning because anybody who still has 1 loss, regardless of who it was to, is still in the conversation. And that would include Texas this week against Oklahoma because there's so much football left to play.
If Texas goes out and pounds Oklahoma, let's say Oklahoma's still banged up. Maybe their defense really isn't as good as we thought. Statistically speaking, they're not. I mean, I think they're 48th right now in the sport in total defense. So if Texas goes out and pounds them, are the Oklahoma Sooner faithful going to start to get a little restless with where their program is relative to their biggest rival that's sitting on top of the college football world?
I love that question because here's where we are in college football right now. I've always been a big believer. I think schools fire coaches too quickly. I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction I think 2 years in, they start talking about it too soon. And then 3 years, they pull the trigger because they just don't know what to do. And then they don't know who's coming in next. And then you start the complete rebuild. And the people that were bitching and moaning about firing the coach, now you bring in a new coach and you got to start all over again. So the complaining you were doing about year 2 and year 3 now goes to 2-3 more years. They're talking about a 5-year rebuild. Who's that good for anybody? But I will say with Oklahoma, there are some coaches that I have talked to that believe Oklahoma is one of the top 4 or 5 jobs in the country. And Oklahoma will not tolerate Texas lapping them in every way, shape, or form. Recruiting, they were in the college football playoff last year. They appear to be headed that way again. They're back in a league with Texas A&M, who, by the way, year 1 under Mike Elko, they're 5-1. They've got a schedule that could see them in the SEC championship or an at-large bid in the college football playoff. And so if Oklahoma starts looking at this and saying, oh man, do we have the right situation for this SEC gauntlet? Then yeah, I could see people get a little antsy. I don't know that it's the time to do it. I understand why they would do it. But again, I've said this a million times. If you're going to fire your coach or if you're going to make a move, you had better make sure the person you're bringing in is unequivocally better than the person you have. And it's funny you say Texas, and we're using this as a conversation because when Tom Herman was let go, they knew Sark was the guy. I mean, that hire was made in 10 minutes. It was probably made before the move was done. Yeah. Because they knew that, like, this is the guy we think we can go to bat with. They'll tell you they didn't know they were going to the SEC. We know they were going to the SEC. So I could see and understand why Oklahoma fans would feel that way. But there's a lot to play out here over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
No doubt. One game with significant consequences on either side is Florida, Tennessee. It's going to fly under the radar this week because people are going to focus so much on the teams ranked in the top 5, 6, 7, what have you.
Yeah.
But this game to me is massive. I mean, Billy Napier and their program quietly have won 2 in a row. Things are looking a little bit better for the Gators as they move forward. Now they go to Tennessee. They've kind of had Tennessee's number at times. They beat them last year in Gainesville. Now Tennessee's reeling a bit, and maybe they got a little exposed with who they are along the offensive line and maybe at quarterback. If Florida wins the game, what does that mean for Billy Napier's job security and the perception of this program?
So, okay, let's go back to what I just said. You're firing a coach year 3. We're at 2.5 years, right?
Yeah.
You know my thoughts on getting rid of the prior coach. And so it's not necessarily Billy Napier's fault that there was 3 consecutive New Year's 6 bowl wins and then a slide in year 4, and that got the coach fired, right? That got Dan Mullen fired. So with Napier, the only way to stabilize the situation is to pull him into an office, look at the recruiting. Are we headed in the right direction? Do recruits want to come play at Florida? Are we active in the transfer portal? Are we on par with the rest of our SEC peers? If the answer to that is yes, and they're competitive on the field, I'll say it again. Don't make the move unless you know the guy you're getting can take you to the next level. They came out of the bye week. They looked good against UCF. UCF's a bit shocking that they look the way that they do, but winning breeds confidence. It's still Florida. There's still talent. I really, really like Graham Mertz at quarterback. Billy Napier in Florida were just handed a blueprint by Sam Pittman. Here's how you beat Tennessee. Here's how you slow the game down. Here's how you get to Nico Iamaleava. It's all there on tape. And so I would even go a step further, Greg. I'd love to see him be competitive because you just want to see that the person that's in charge of the program right now is putting it in the right direction. There's 3 things I believe that require a firing of a coach: bad recruiting and bad effort and bad buy-in. You can tell by watching a game if the team is bought in by their effort. And then if the recruiting's awful on top of that, well, then yeah, the thing's dead. Move on. But I don't know that that's the case in Florida's case.
I think it's fair rebuttal. Let's go to the Ole Miss LSU game. Really interesting one at night. I think the loser might be out of the playoff conversation. Granted, there's still opportunities on their schedule. Ole Miss has Georgia coming to town. They have other big win potential. Look at LSU. They got Bama coming to town. They have A&M on the schedule. Like, there's still big opportunities for this team, but it feels like with how these teams have played and the inconsistencies, another loss is probably going to happen, even in addition to this one. So is this one a loser leaves town from the playoff discussion type of game?
I said that on your old Sirius XM radio show this morning. I said that I believe this is the first playoff elimination game we've had this year. I still stand by that because it's kind of weird because there's enough football to play your way back into it.
Right.
But there's also enough football to where you run out of turns.
Right.
LSU's loss to USC doesn't look good anymore. Like you could justify as long as USC was a top 10 team. Like, oh, they lost to a top 10 team, neutral site week 1. Great. But now USC's got 2 losses. And LSU's kind of been hiding a little bit since then. And so Ole Miss losing to Kentucky and LSU, they do have the games on their schedule to get back in it. But at this stage in the game, with all these other teams out there, you don't want to be the first 2-loss team. And the loser of this game is. And with the way that the college football world is working right now with some of these surprise unbeatens, like Pitt, how is Pitt? Like, they're 5-0. Indiana's undefeated. The service academies are undefeated. That would take care of the group of 5. Basically, you just don't want to be the first big-time school with 2 losses because that's going to come get you in November.
It certainly seems that way. You mentioned USC a second ago. A couple big ones in the Big Ten I want to ask you about before we get you out of here.
Yeah.
Penn State at SC. Feels like SC is in wounded animal mode. Got to have it. Like, they can't lose this game. Penn State, James Franklin, if he loses this game, it's the same narrative as always. He can't win the big one. He can't knock off the big dogs. Now, one, I don't know if USC is a big dog, but I know that in the event in which SC wins the game, then there will be a strong reaction against what James Franklin's doing at Penn State's program. So how do you kind of see this one shaken out and the potential fallout that either side loses? Lincoln Riley loses or James Franklin loses, everyone's going to lose their mind.
Yeah, so with James Franklin, what have we said? I mean, we said it on Selection Day for the College Football Playoff, knowing there was going to be a 12-team playoff. What have we said about this? The College Football Playoff was made for Penn State and Ole Miss. Perennially 10-2, can't get over the Alabama-Georgia hump. James Franklin can't get over the Ohio State-Michigan hump. Okay, a lot of people haven't during that time. The thing that James Franklin has going for him is 2 things. One, USC has already lost to Michigan and Minnesota. Their Penn State fans have every reason to believe, and rightfully so, that their teams are better than both Michigan and Minnesota this year. And so if you lose to a team that just lost to Minnesota, there goes the James Franklin argument again, and then he's run out of house money for the rest of the season with a team that's pretty good. And Drew Aller's looked a lot better. And so this is a win. Like, USC is new to the Big Ten, and it's already clear the Big Ten athletes giving them problems. It's a different kind of athlete. It's big, it's physical, it's meat and potatoes, it's Midwest football. It's not 7-on-7 out west. And so Penn State's chocked full of Big Ten athletes. And so I think they're going to give USC a problem. Conversely, with Lincoln Riley, I mean, he's an interesting conversation piece because of what happened last year with a really, really talented team. You know, they get that early win against LSU and all is right in the world with Miller Moss and the Trojans. I just think they're going to have trouble assimilating to what is going to be completely different. Look what we saw. Did you think Michigan would lose to Washington? I didn't. Vegas did, and they were right. There's just going to be some weird stuff that happens this year. And I'm going to give the pass to the teams that are new to the league because there's just going to be weird things that happen. You're telling me the ACC from South Florida to the Bay Area makes sense? And Miami needed some things to go to their way to get out of there with a win. And so for James Franklin, he's got no excuse. He has no excuse in this one. For Lincoln Riley, maybe an asterisk.
And then finally, Oregon and Ohio State. Ohio State traveling to Oregon. It feels like, I feel like Ohio State's really good. Now, I think we finally learned last week just how improved they are along both lines of scrimmage. So I look at this one. I think Ryan Day's got a good team. I think they're in good shape. So that makes me think that this is more about Dan Lanning. And if Dan Lanning can somehow pull off the upset the reaction to Ryan Day's team, that really, really, really highly compensated team that is put together, it feels like an all-star team, is going to be strong as can be. So everyone might respect Oregon, but the fallout if Ohio State loses this one is going to be significant. So depending on how you view it, who do you think has more to be lost in this situation? Ryan Day or Dan Lanning, who lost multiple times to Washington last year and got to have its situations?
It's Ohio State. It's Ohio State. It's Ohio State by a long shot. Because for me, I said this in the preseason, I'll say it now. I think Ohio State's got the most talent of any roster in the country. They just do. And so you go to Eugene, which, by the way, I think is the 4th week in a row where we've had a really, really good game. That would be a really, really good Rose Bowl, but it's not anymore because of realignment. This would be another one. Ohio State, Oregon, Big Ten, Pac-12 Rose Bowl would be amazing, but it's now a conference game. And Ohio State's going to have to prove to a lot of people that, hey, you know what? The Will Howard thing's going to work. You have 2 top 10 backs in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. You have Jeremiah Smith, who is absolutely incredibly freakish. You have Emeka Egbuka, who's one of the best receivers in the country. You have everything you need to win a national championship and win it by a nice margin. Nothing is lost this week if they lose the game, but everything is gained if you go in there and win. Alton's a tough place to play.
Yeah.
It's a tough place to play. And they're used to Penn State, tough place to play. They're used to the Big House, tough place to play. But in the Big Ten, that's really it. Maybe Nebraska and Lincoln, that's a tough place to play. They're walking into a whole other environment. And again, I say this as bringing up another point, 1-loss teams, other than court of public opinion, this could be one of 3 times they play. They could play this weekend, they could play in the Big Ten championship, and then they could play in the college football playoff. It's the same with Alabama and Georgia. It's the same with Texas and Georgia. Same with all these teams. And so I just want to see how this talent lines up. Because Dylan Gabriel and Oregon, they're loaded. I mean, you could argue they've got a top 5 talented roster. So I just can't wait to see what the talent does. And let me tell you something. If either one of these teams go in there and it's a 10 to 13 point convincing victory, then you're talking about, that's the team to beat in the entire country. Texas is really, really good. Texas is a top 3 team. All cylinders clicking. I mean, Ohio State, if that thing hits, I don't think it's a more talented team in the country.
Yeah, I think they have the highest ceiling. I don't know if anyone can push back on that, at least right now. Matty, always phenomenal stuff. We really appreciate you, man, and we'll look forward to seeing you on SportsCenter, the Matt Barrie Show, and always wall-to-wall coverage on ESPN on the weekends, my brother.
By the way, big one this week, JMU. We're at JMU, Coastal Carolina, Sunbelt, Funbelt. Get in on it. It's gonna be
Let's do it.
Right.
Part of the 55 consecutive days of football. We got Thursday night action with Matt Barrie and Danny Mullen. So we appreciate you, bud.
All right, bud. See you soon.
That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Continue to ask all of you guys to support the show by subscribing to it wherever you get your podcast, rating it when you can. That'd be awesome. I already told you how many of you guys have responded and pushed back on the rating sabotage that we've received over the years. So we appreciate you guys very, very much. So for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.